good morning, afternoon, evening, whenever you're joining us. I am Old Man Troy, joined by the blissful youngster, Kevin Cunningham, a.k.a. Kid Cunny on Twitter. How you doing today, my friend?
Doing very blissful, actually.
I don't know where that one came from. I haven't given you a good one in a long time, and I'm like, I don't want to say spectacular again. You're always spectacular, so blissful. You're blissful today.
Yeah, I'll take it.
And you are. You're in a good mood. I still go back every time. Like if you're kind of in that monotone voice, I'm like, oh, what did you say you were? Like depressed or something? You sounded depressed.
Yeah, I don't listen to all the shows that we do every single weekend, but occasionally
we do a ton.
I'll pop it on. Right. Occasionally I'll pop it on.
We literally can't listen to every show we do when it's airing when it does. I mean, if we did that, we wouldn't have anything else to do in life. Right.
So, yeah, I don't listen every single time, but occasionally when I do listen, the last one I listened to, just a couple times ago, I just sounded depressed. And I was not depressed, but I just sounded depressed. So, anyway, I'm doing well.
It's a running joke. For those listening in, it's a running joke on the side between the youngster and I. So every once in a while, the youngster's depressed when he's not depressed. He doesn't even know he's depressed.
Right, apparently. So fans know, to get away from depression, so fans know this show may not be airing. Hopefully, we just recorded a show with someone from across the pond, as Troy likes to say, over in the UK, who I believe he either covers soccer, talks Premier League, however it may go. Hopefully this show is not airing, and our other one that we just recorded is. But we just talked about the Premier League. We talked about a couple Big Ten news hits, some quick hitters that I had to throw out there to get our Big Ten audience happy. But if that interview, which it sounded extremely choppy on our end, if it goes through the system and it's not, then fantastic. You're not listening to this. You're listening to that show. So it is what it is. But if this show is the one you are listening to, then welcome. And we're not going to be talking about the Premier League. Excuse me. But for the Big Ten, so Premier League, if you do care about the Premier League and you listen to the show, as of a couple hours ago, it was announced that the Premier League is returning on June 17th. So that's fantastic.
You know what, youngster? We can do whatever we want on this show because we're not on the air. I mean, we're not on the radio. And, this is our own creative content. Mm-hmm. And I like the Premier League. And so I want to throw this out to fans. And now on LinkedIn, I can put up polls. So I'm going to probably put up a LinkedIn poll. Premier League without fans to me, Kevin, again, I understand people want it back, especially in the UK. That's like the NFL here. They can't cancel the Premier League. We knew that was never going down. They weren't canceling it. But I said on that prior interview, the Premier League fans, and nothing against NFL fans because I know how much fans love their teams. But really, comparatively, soccer fans in the UK are crazy. It is life honestly, and Troy, death for them.
Yeah, Troy, honestly, I'm not anti-SEC. I'm not Big Ten is, better than SEC. Big Ten is so much better than SEC. I give the SEC props where I think they deserve props, and I give the Big Ten props where I think they deserve props. I think as a collective whole, the SEC cares more. Their fan base is more live and die by every single Saturday. Even in Arkansas, even Kentucky, I shouldn't say Kentucky football because that truly is a basketball school first, but as a whole, Ole Miss football, Arkansas football, even those guys, not even talking about Tennessee and Alabama and Florida, those big guys obviously care, and Michigan fans care a lot, and Penn State fans care a lot, and Ohio State fans care a lot. But as a whole, they have that tagline where it just means more. And part of it, you see where some of the top recruits come from, and it's always around the Southeast. You have top guys coming from California, top guys coming from, all across the country. But the majority of the elite prospects come from kind of that southeastern region. And part of it is there's a number of different factors, but I think, yeah, partially it does mean more down there. And I shouldn't say necessarily all the fans, because, again, I listed a couple of schools, and I don't think that's correct. But for the players, I think it does mean more. And the families, it does mean more. For some. Again, compare, Alabama, Ohio State football fans and how much they care. Like, obviously they both care a ton. But as a whole, I think the SEC, it almost does mean more down there. And that's not a shot at the Big Ten. I just think it does mean more. And you can tell based on where college football means more, based on where the top prospects come from. Like, if you tell me, Troy, that lacrosse means as much here in Florida, I'm in Florida. If you tell me that lacrosse means as much here as it does in the Northeast, I'd tell you you're nuts.
You would be nuts.
Right. It just doesn't. And that's okay. That's not a shot at Florida. That's not, praising the Northeast. That's just reality. And I would assume, I have no idea, but top hockey prospects, are they coming from Arizona and California and Texas? I doubt it. It's probably more so Midwest and Northern and, places that are colder, and hockey is just more of a culture than it is in Texas. Texas culture is football. Alabama culture is football. Florida culture is football. That's just the way it is. So, anyway, to finally get around to your point there, like the Premier League, watching the Premier League and the fans that are there and the fans of those teams, that's like watching top-flight SEC Big Ten college football and saying and comparing it to the top, Chinese league. Like, yeah, it's big, but it's not the same. And you're talking about Alabama and Ohio State and Michigan football compared to Colorado football. Like, yeah, it's big there. It's not close to Alabama. It's not close to Ohio State. It's not close to Penn State with 100,000 fans all decked out in one freaking color just to yell for a team.
And here, I'm going to kind of throw to your point here, youngster. Like, you could have West Ham playing Norwich City.
Yeah.
And those fans, you're going to pack 100,000 fans into a stadium, whether it's at West Ham or Norwich City. And those are two middle-of-the-pack teams, if not bottom teams in the Premier League.
Right.
But if you turn the TV on, and if you purely don't know anything about Premier League soccer, but you just turn the TV on and watch one of these games on a Saturday or Sunday morning, and you just listen to the fans, you would think they're playing for the title.
Right.
And the two teams I just mentioned, they're average teams. They'll pull off a win every once in a while, but they're middle-of-the-pack teams. But if you just listen to the fans, you would not believe it. It is louder than any Penn State, Ohio State game. And I'll say that. And again, Penn State, Ohio State, wow, what a matchup, right? At either stadium. But a West Ham, Norwich City game, Premier League, probably going to be right up there with the decibel level and the enthusiasm in the stadium.
Right.
And that's not even a Man U playing against, Tottenham. I mean, that would be a good game.
Comparatively, that's Purdue hosting, Illinois. Yeah. I mean, that's middle of the pack to bottom. Purdue, Illinois, I think that's, talking about Norwich City soccer. But at the end of the day, like you said, it's, in terms of loudness and intensity, you would think you're, like you said, you're watching, the fight for the top of the Premier League, the Champions League title game.
Even the teams that are going to be getting relegated, they talk about that, right? I mean, the fans are still into it. And again, we talked about they live and die with their football. It's football. I can't have an English accent. I'd have no idea how to say it. But we got just a couple Big Ten things. Let's move into the Big Ten, my friend. Got a little basketball news and a little football news as it relates to transfers. That's about all we have to talk about on Big right now.
Yeah, it'll be a quick show. I was talking about like a under 30-minute show here. But anyway, so after talking about soccer, we talked about, Big Ten fans and whatnot. But anyway, so basketball talks on last week's show about Purdue guard Nojel Eastern, who's a 6'7" junior who's very long, and as a freshman, I loved watching him a couple years ago when he came to Purdue, and he was an elite defender day one. I mean, they could stick him on anybody outside of a 7-foot dominant big man in college, which how many of those?
Nobody can defend that anyway.
Right. Like, you get Greg Oden one year, you get Anthony Davis one year, and Anthony Davis wasn't even dominant offensively at Kentucky. But you get those guys, and Duke's had a couple, and once in a while there's a guy in the Big Ten who just dominates in the interior. At Garza last year.
Frank the Tank.
Frank the Tank, there you go. So occasionally you'll have these 7-footers that are just, they're going to get 20 and 10, no matter who they play against. They may have a down game where they get 16 and 8, but, 9 times out of 10 they're getting 20 and 10. And they move on to the NBA immediately. So Nojel Eastern can guard anybody outside of those guys. And I loved watching him play, and Purdue was, it was fantastic if you're a Purdue fan to have a guy like Eastern on your team, and that's why a couple of years ago when they had Eastern in the backcourt paired with Carson Edwards, and then they had shooters outside of that, it was like, oh my God, this team, the sky's the limit. And we saw at that March Madness when they should have beat Virginia, when Virginia ended up eking them out and eventually won the whole thing. That Purdue team was incredibly dangerous. And it was because of the backcourt and the shooters they had. They had Harms on that team. Harms is over at BYU now because he transferred. I guess, was it earlier this month or late last month, one of the two. But so they lost Harms, Purdue did, to BYU, and now they're losing Eastern to Michigan.
Hey, the bright note, youngster, the bright note about this, bright note for Purdue fans, nobody entered the transfer portal this week.
There we go. See? As far as I know, no Purdue player has entered the transfer portal, and we talked about that last week, how it's like, why are these two guys who were going to be starters, presumably, just all of a sudden pick up and say, I'm leaving. And especially for Eastern, because, again, he's a junior. He is not a graduate transfer. So he most likely, unless the NCAA pulls a Houdini Act, which would not be the first time, gets immediate eligibility. That should not be the case for Eastern. So he should have.
Well, and that's why I said, youngster, there's something behind the story that we don't know. Mm-hmm. There really is. I mean, like you said, two guys that are going to have prominent roles next year. Harm's a little different, like you said. He's a graduate guy, so he can play immediately. Didn't even need to worry about the transfer rule.
Right.
But Eastern, he's been at this place for 2 years. He's not going to the NBA, so he's going to play. He's going to have to sit out a year unless there's something we don't know that he thinks he's going to be able to play. We're going to talk about another transfer here in a little bit for football. Same thing. Unless there's some excruciating circumstance that makes you transfer, the NCAA is not going to just say, yeah, you can transfer and play. You're going to have to sit out a year. So it makes me really wonder, if we peel back the onion, is there something down there that we don't know about? And maybe it'll come out. I mean, this is two guys now in the off season coming out, and we're not even close to basketball starting up yet for college.
Right.
And we'll see how this ball rolls. But for Michigan, I mean, if I'm a Michigan fan, we talked about this, Howard's got to look at it like, well, I've got a premier defender, and if I can go out now and recruit and get a compliment shooting guard, a guy that can score, defense always is going to win, Kevin. If you can defend, even against a good offensive team, if you get 2 or 3 more stops than the other team and get 2 or 3 more possessions, and you have guys that can score, that's to your benefit. That's why that Purdue team 2 years ago was so good. They could scrap it out in a defensive game against Wisconsin and play a 54-50 game. But if they had to go up against a team, who was high scoring back then?
We'll
just say Michigan State. They could go toe-to-toe with Michigan State and play in an 88-86 game because they had the guys that could score, but they played good defense. When you do that in the Big Ten, you're going to be near the top. And I think if I'm Howard, I'm looking at it going, man, if I build good defense, I got some guys maybe that can score a little more consistently. Maybe I can jump into the upper quarter of the Big Ten. And he wasn't that far out last year. I mean, I wasn't a big believer. I said, let's see how this guy does, and I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. year two's coming around. Let them build the program. But Michigan was in the middle of the pack, and now you had some good defenders, add a good shooter in a recruiting class. You can go now to your recruits and say, hey, look, I got this transfer from Purdue. That only helps his recruiting. I mean, Michigan won on this one big time, Kevin.
Yeah, no question. And Eastern is not going to be a star, no matter where he goes. And if he makes the NBA, he's not. I'd be shocked if he was a star in the NBA because his offensive ability is completely non-existent. He can't shoot. Just straight up, he can't shoot.
But he's not playing in the NBA. Last I checked, there's no defense in the NBA.
Occasionally you have guys like Patrick Beverly who pride themselves on defense, and there's like 5 guys where it's like, oh, yeah, that guy's an elite defender. And that's the first thing you say about him. There's like literally probably 5.
And so let's be honest, youngster. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
NBA team. You got a guy that can shoot the lights out, or you got a guy that's a great defender. Who's the NBA team taking?
Right. Yeah. No, I hear you, and I don't even have to answer the question.
His chance in the NBA is to go to a bona fide team that has a ton of veterans on it that need a good defender to come off the bench, and to let I'll just use LeBron James. LeBron James comes off the court. And I'll talk like when he's in his prime. So I'll give an example. Like when he played for the Cavaliers, he came off the court, and you're like, you just want to maintain where you're at. Is it a 4-point lead? Are we down by 2? Are we up by 6? You take LeBron off the court, and you want to get him back on the court in that same situation. And so for him, his NBA role is going to be to go to a team like that has a star offensive power that when he comes off the court, you don't want to lose where you were score-wise. And a guy that can go out there and give a 2-3 minute rest to the star, and you don't care if he scores 0 points, you just want him to shut down the guy on the other team. That's his only chance of playing in the NBA. He's not going to go and get drafted by a team and say, okay, go score 20 points a game. That's not happening. He might score 20 points a season. I mean, that's about his ceiling. So we can move on if you want.
I mean, he averaged 4.9 points per game last year. And he started 27 games. And he averaged 4.9 points per game. So, again, not an offensive threat, but for Michigan, you have yourselves one of the best, if not literally the best perimeter defender in the country. That's what you just got. So, anyway, that's basketball news.
Yeah, let's talk some football.
Tua Tagovailoa is on the Dolphins, and he played college football at Alabama, as everyone knows. However, his younger brother was a 4-star recruit, and this past year he was a freshman also at Alabama, and he threw, it was either 9 or 10 passes, obviously, under his older brother's, leadership there, being the signal caller for the Crimson Tide, so he did not have a role. But he announced that he would be entering the transfer portal. We talked about that, I believe, on last week's show. And since then, he has decided to transfer, and he's not transferring to a place like Florida. He's not transferring to somewhere else in the SEC. He's not transferring to another power program. He's transferring to Maryland. And part of the reason, the main reason why is because that family. So
before you give the main reason,
okay.
If you're an average college fan, you're probably scratching your head like, why in the hell is he going to Maryland?
Right.
We know why, and you're going to tell the reason why. But if there's like an average college fan listening to the show, like, okay, if you're a 4-star, you played at Alabama, why would you go to Maryland?
Yeah.
You would think that you'd go to a I guess it is a Power 5 school. Blah. They're a Power 5 conference. They're not at the level of some of the Power 5 schools in the Big Ten. But why Maryland? Tell them why, youngster. Tell them why Maryland. It makes sense.
Second-year Terrapin head coach Mike Locksley was the offensive coordinator at Alabama. And so that family is very tight-knit in general, and Locksley, being the offensive coordinator, obviously was tight-knit with Tua, and so he knew the family very well, and so here you go. Here's your connection. This is why Tua's younger brother is transferring to Maryland. There was reports he could go to Miami, which would make sense. But no, not Miami. He's going to be a Terp.
Well, and that's a good endorsement from Tua, right? And maybe Tua gives some of his development to his former coach. And I'm sure that in the recruiting process that, I mean, there's a lot of credibility that goes to that. And I want to throw a story out. And I didn't, when we recorded before, it was because we had a guest and blah, 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 blah. And I just didn't want to go down that road time-wise to let our guests hang on the line. But in a situation like this, youngster, you've heard my stories about being out on the recruiting trail and being in the trenches recruiting in college.
Yeah.
Again, granted, I only did it for soccer. I don't want to downplay what I did because I still recruited the same as a Division I Alabama Nick Saban. I mean, my recruiting was the same, just not on the high profile, right? But when you go out there, it is about building relationships in recruiting. Yeah. And when you have coaches that go to different schools and are recruiting, and I'll share a quick example. I had a guy that I hired, and then he ended up getting a head coaching job prior to the season. So this guy didn't even coach a season with me. And he felt bad, and I'm like, dude, you got to take the opportunity. You got to go. Don't worry about my program. We'll be fine. You just got offered a head coaching job in college. Take it.
Right.
Go. Thing is, he was out on the recruiting trail all summer with me.
Right.
So what do you think happened? He built relationships, and do you think those recruits came and played for me? No. They went to play for him. And you know what? I had no ill feeling toward that. It's like, it sucks. It sucked I lost an assistant coach, and now I got to get one in 2 weeks. And it sucks I lost this player because I thought he was going to be coming to training camp in 3 weeks. But it is what it is. My point, players are going to go where they feel comfortable. They feel that they're going to go somewhere where they feel really, I'll say it this way, all lovey-dovey by the coach. Yeah. And they believe in the system. And they believe they're going to get a fair shot. And, you know, so that, to me, you say he went to Maryland, I'm like, makes sense to me. It makes 100% sense to me. Some other people might be scratching their head like, oh, why that? But that, and some people might scoff at the idea of relationships, coaches, players, but it's out there. It is out there. And you spend so much time recruiting. And then you talk about the time spent coaching. I mean, I think I told you these stories, youngster. My players, when they left and graduated, still talk to them. I went back for my 40th birthday to Green Bay, and I was in an adult beverage place, and I heard my name called, and I heard the name Coach Troy. Coach Troy, at 40 years old, youngster, a player I coached on a U14 team, saw me and came up to me and said, thank you for all you did to me. How many years later? That's what coaching is sometimes about. But players don't forget. And if they had a good experience, that's what they're looking for. So, again, I have no problem with him going to play at Maryland. I mean, with the relationship that he had with his brother, that's a huge endorsement. That's all I got.
Yeah. You don't hear about it much, but occasionally you'll see awards or lists for the best recruiters in the country when it comes to college football anyway. And like Brian Hartline at Ohio State is one of those. I remember seeing that story pop up a number of places for a very short period of time in the fall last year about his recruiting efforts. And it's like when he has 3 guys move on to the NFL and then going into the 2019 season, he has 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm just looking at the names, 5, 6 guys that played big roles as Ohio State wide receivers last year. And then when 3 of them effectively moved on to the NFL, he's got 3 more 4 or 5 stars going in their play. Like, that's not all Ryan Day. Like, Ryan Day is not going to every single recruit's house and recruiting every single wide receiver, every single tight end, every single special teams player, every single
youngster. I'll interrupt you. I just told you the story when I coached Division III soccer. Division III. My assistant coach did recruiting too. This is Division III soccer. I didn't go see every player play either.
Right.
Nor did I go to all their houses or all their games. You put trust in those guys to go out and recruit and bring people into the program. And you trust them. And, yeah, you put your stamp of approval on it. You make a phone call. Maybe you do a home visit to seal the deal. Or on their visit day, you talk to them, say, hey, heard this about you. But, yeah, a lot of times those head coaches, they're not even involved till the end when that player maybe needs a push or a pat on the back, like welcome to the program.
Right.
That is a reality, and that's even at Division III.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you have, 80 guys, 90 guys, 100 guys, whatever it is that you're looking at, that you're offering scholarships, that you're keeping on as walk-ons, that you're thinking about offering them scholarships, if a scholarship, becomes available, like there's so many freaking players that make up a college football program. It's insane. So anyway, it pays to have assistant coaches that recruit well. And if Hartline were to leave for Michigan State, you bet that Michigan State would pull a couple of guys that were committed to Ohio State, or a couple of guys from Ohio State's roster would transfer immediately. Like, wouldn't shock me at all, because they have the relationship not with Ohio State and the brand of Ohio State and Ryan Day. Some guys do. Some guys go into high school and they're stud athletes, and it's like, yeah, I'm just going to play for Ohio State. I don't care who the coach is. I just want to play at Ohio State. And they end up doing it if they, are able to. But sometimes you see a 4-star, a 5-star quarterback, like, choose California instead of USC, and it's like, why is he going to Cal instead of USC? Why is he going to Texas A&M instead of Texas? Why is he going to Oklahoma State instead of Oklahoma? Like, Oklahoma should be getting this kid, not Oklahoma State. Well, it's because of the quarterback coach, the offensive coordinator, and developing that relationship from, some of these kids when they're in middle school. So it's, recruiting, it takes a lot of time, and your positional coaches, especially in football, have to hit the trails hard and do well at it. And eventually it pays off if they do well at it. So, yeah, that's in short, why.
We turned 2 topics into a 30-some minute show. Man,
yeah,
we are good. We are good. Hope you enjoyed the show today, everybody. For the Blissful Youngster, I am the old man. Hope you enjoyed everything we talked about today. We'll get back at you next week. Same place, same time. Enjoy your week.